Adam Rudell with Microsoft CSS, focusing on Azure Stack Hub and software-defined networking. I want to take some time today to discuss certificates for your network controller infrastructure. As some of you may be aware, or if you're not, certificates are a big factor within the SDN fabric infrastructure. Not only is the certificate being used to secure the northbound endpoint, you may have certificates used to secure communications between each of your network controller nodes, as well as your southbound devices such as your load balancer, MUX, and server. Part of this, these certificates are, your responsibility is to, keep them updated, don't let them expire. But sometimes things happen, maybe you miss it, cert is expired, and now you can't access your network controller environment. So I wanted to talk about how you can remediate that, before they expire or even after they expire. And so we'll just do a quick kind of walkthrough. So I've got the HCI SDN documentation uploaded right now. It's talking about how to renew the certificate, and there's two types. There's the REST certificate, which is used for your northbound API communication and southbound communication, as well as your network controller node cert. There's two ways to to renew these. You can do a manual renewal or an automatic renewal. And with this demo, we're going to talk about the automatic renewal with Start SDN certificate rotation that's included with the SDN diagnostics module. So let me jump over to my environment. All right, so I've got my environment here, and I am connected on to my NCL1 server. So what I can do is I can always check to see what my certificate expiry looks like. So if I do get SDN network controller or get network controller, I can return back all the nodes within my cluster. I can see, from here, this is my certificate used for the northbound API. And right now I've got it, it looks like 10 years before expiry, or 8 at this point. So not any rush to get this configured. Now the reason I recommended to use the get SDN network controller is if you use get-network controller and your certs already expire, you will get an error message returned back with this. So the get SDN network controller has some fault tolerance built in, and that if for any reason get network controller is not functional, it will do the necessary procedures to get this information and return it back to you. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start the rotation. So on my network controller, and I've already installed the latest SDN diagnostics module and onto the system, I'm going to do start-SDN certificate rotation. And there's a few different options. So the generate certificate, this one's used for, the SDN diagnostics module will handle the creation of the appropriate certificates in a self-signed manner, and by default it will default to 3 years. You can also configure this to be longer if you'd like. In addition to generate certificate, there is a cert path configuration which will allow you to specify a folder directory where you may have already created your self-signed certs, or maybe you've generated certificate authority certs and you've got them in a PFX format. You can then place them all there, and it will do the logic to map each one of those certs to the appropriate host. And finally, there is a cert rotate config. This allows you to kind of, if you've already installed the certificates, you've generated the certs, you've installed them to the nodes, you can then create a cert rotate config, which will have kind of a mapping of each node to what certificate you want to use. So for the majority, if you're using a self-signed cert, you can just run generate certificate, and then you will need to specify a credential. If you don't specify it here, it will prompt you. And the reason for this is because there's multiple hops it's got to jump through to access all the infrastructure and stuff like that. So you need to be able to take your admin credentials to be able to do all the operations. So I'm going to specify my credentials here. And then it's going to also prompt you for a certificate password. So this is if you need to export the cert with the private key. So go ahead and specify what you want that to be, and then save it somewhere. So just a disclaimer that this is a preview feature. Go ahead and proceed with yes. And I'll move this over to the side here. So at this point, what it's going to do is it's going to go connect into the system. You'll pull the environment info, pull stuff related to the Service Fabric cluster manifest and stuff like that. Now, if your certificates are already expired, you will see a lot of red in this. Just be patient. Everything's built with fault tolerance in mind, that if it is expired, we will work through that and then figure out all the necessary components, and we will actually go through and fix up everything. So, if you're in that situation, just give yourself a little bit additional time for it to work through. So at this point, so it's created the certificate. So we've got the new northbound one. It's setting the appropriate machine key passwords. It's exporting the cert and then installing them to the appropriate node. So for your encryption cert, it's going to install it to the network controllers. It'll install into root authority. It will also install to your southbound devices, which would be your muxes and your servers. So at this point right now, all it's doing is seeding the certificate out. So let this run through. And then likewise, because my network controller cluster is using X509, it's also generating node certificates for each one of the network controllers and then installing it to the appropriate network controller nodes. So here, all it's done is, created it, copied it, installed it into the appropriate cert directories, and then set the machine keys. We haven't done anything yet at this point with the network controller configuration. So at this point, it's going to give you kind of a warning just to let you know what's going to change. So we can see here the REST certificate is going to be updated from this thumbprint to this thumbprint with the expiration date. Likewise, you can see that it's going to update the node certificate for NC 1, 2, and 3 with the same information. So at this point, I can specify yes to proceed. Now, the one thing I just wanted to call out as well is that all the certs by default will get installed to C Windows Tracing SDN Diag cert. So for any reason after this point, if something were to happen, let's say maybe you close out the PowerShell window, or there's an error, that critical error that happens that this fails out, you don't have to do the generate cert. You can just specify the file path location where these certs are, and it will pick up and resume from wherever the failure point was. So just wanted to make note of that and mention it. So at this point here, it's going to go ahead and call set network controller to configure the new REST certificate. The rest of this operation here for setting the REST encryption and then updating the node certs generally takes anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, just kind of depending how things are. So this one's just you just gotta wait and let it proceed through And so I'll go ahead and just pause this recording, and then I'll connect again once this is done. All right, so we are back here, and so the cert rotation has completed on this environment. So you can see it set the network controller rest certificate. Once that completes, the script will pause in between each of the steps, give it enough time to kind of sort itself out. So we update the rest certificate. Here we update the encryption cert using the same rest certificate. And then we go into a stage of rotating the NC node certificates. So this will perform each one. And so you can see here, it takes about 20 minutes per node for these ones. Once we get through the node certificate rotation, we will start the rotation of the southbound certificate credentials. So it will actually go through each one of the X509 connections within for the server references, and it will update the base64 encoding string of the certificate used by network controller to talk to the southbound devices. So I'll actually see, it'll run through, check that, and then I'll process all the rest of them and make sure that they're all set properly. Once that cert rotation for southbound devices is complete, we'll move on to the final stage, and this is to basically restart the SOP manager service and the vSwitch service, so that way they pick up the new certificate for the southbound communications. At this point now, your certificates have been rotated for your network controller, northbound API, the encryption between the nodes, the node certificates, and then those certs have been seeded to your data plane. Okay, now that we've rotated our network controller northbound cert and the southbound certs, one of the last things you might need to do for your environment is renew the self-signed certificates used by your load balancer MUX and your server. So these functions are also available within the SDN diagnostics module to help you orchestrate your way through that. And so this is only for self-signed certificate scenarios. So let me move this over. I'm on network controller right now. So what I'll do is start SDN MUX certificate rotation. I'll specify the network controller. I'll just point back to itself. There is a credential you'll have to provide, and we'll do generate certificate. So I'll go ahead and provide my credentials, and then I will specify the password for my private key. So at this point, this will run through. We'll create the self-signed cert. And so here we've generated the certificate, and we are copying these to the MUX in between the network controller. Once that certificate has been generated and then copied over to all of the nodes, it's actually going to go ahead and update the virtual servers for the connection. So this is being updated, and it's removing the certificate and setting the thumbprint. And then what we're doing is just waiting for the SLB MUX service to restart to pick up that new certificate. So this will just take a little bit here. All right, so MUX1 has been rotated with the new cert, and we're updating the certificate information for MUX2 within network controller for the virtual server reference. All right, and this rotation for the load balancer muxes is completed. All right, and the last thing I need to do is rotate my server certificate. So there's a command here called start SDN server certificate rotation. Specify my environment information, and we will generate certificate. SDN lab. Set my private key password. Accept the, the preview feature. And similar to like the MUX, it's going to go through, generate the self-signed cert, set all the appropriate permissions for machine keys on it, and it's going to copy to the appropriate nodes within the SDN fabric. Once that's done, it's going to go ahead and update the certificate information for the server's resource to make sure that we've got the new thumbprint recorded for the environment. At this point, then it's going to restart NC host agent service on each of the server nodes, so that way those certificates are used now. You'll notice I've got up here there's access denied, and that's just for copying over SMB. And so by default, it has a fault tolerance with the module to try SMB first and then fail over to WinRM. So if you see those, as long as the WinRM copy works, you're fine. So at this point, the cert rotation for the servers has completed. All the services have been restarted. And at this point, what you'd want to do is kind of just go and validate the health of everything. You can do manual validation. Otherwise, you can kick off the debug SDN fabric infrastructure, which will go through and perform a series of tests for your environment to kind of validate the health of everything. So kick that off, double check, make sure everything's looking good. See, I got a issue on my environment here with the gateway, but not related to anything we just did with the rotation of the certs for the network controllers, the MUX, and the servers. Gateways don't need certs because they use WinRM and Kerberos authentication, so there's nothing you need to do for them. Thanks all for joining this video demo, and hope this helped.